Oh, right.
10 o'clock.
With the amendments on.
Thank you, members. 10 o'clock and we're live. Morning, everybody. Welcome to those afar, particularly Jim, who is not a guest. I get annoyed about this title of a guest. He's a member and needs altering. Welcome, Grant, Mary. Nice to see you all and others. So, and welcome members and officers who are already here. Let us now move to apologies for absence, but we know there aren't any apologies because you're all here. Disclosable pecuniary interests. I don't need to read that, do I? Members are reminded must declare their disclosable pecuniary interests. Are there any disclosable pecuniary interests? There were none declared. Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 22nd of June 2023. Before we go on to discuss these, would somebody like to move them as a true and correct record?
I have a...
Rosemary does.
Sorry, Chair. No, I don't want to move on to ask that there's a correction. I don't think Jim is listed as present, and I think he was present.
Sorry, your correction?
Is that Jim is not listed as present on the minutes, I don't think. Unless he's in a separate part of the minutes that I didn't see. And he was there.
Well, we'll ask Jim himself.
He was only against.
Pardon?
He was present, and I'll amend the minutes.
He was present. Okay, we don't need to ask Jim. We know. We have evidence that he was present. Thank you, Rosemary. Apart from that amendment, are they agreed as a correct record? Thank you very much. Now, any matters arising from the minutes? There were no matters arising. We now move on to item 4, public questions. Are there any?
No public questions have been received.
Member questions, are there any?
No member questions have been received.
Right, we can now go to item 6, the annual Treasury report. Now, I'm not sure whether Ben, who is with us.
No, it's not.
Oh, he's not with us.
No.
I thought. Right, James, well, it must
It will be James.
Will be James, right.
Yeah.
Like to introduce this, please. Section 151 officer will introduce.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the annual Treasury report for the financial year 22-23. So this looks at the position over the last financial year in relation to the Treasury position. So this is the management of all of the cash that we hold, and the investments that we make, and the borrowing that we undertake as part of that. So the headlines are that we followed all of the appropriate CIPFA regulations and indicators, and we include within the appendices a copy of all the prudential indicators that we're required to show. We show the performance of the investments that we've made, and what that shows is that following our usual and appropriate security, liquidity, yield approach. So the fundamental issue is about ensuring that any funds that we invest are secure. And excuse me, my phone's ringing. I do apologise. I'll just get rid of that. Didn't put it on silent. I apologise. The first priority is the security of any investment that we make. The second priority behind that is the liquidity, meaning that we can get that cash back when we need to. And the third element is then around the yield. Despite that being the order, we have outperformed the benchmark, and that was by a very small percentage, 0.03%, but achieved a return of 1.81. Members of Audit Committee are tasked with the requirement to oversee the Treasury approach and to understand and ensure that they are comfortable with the investments that are made. In terms of that performance, the only thing I would just mention is where we have a market where interest rates are increasing over a short period of time, by definition almost performance will reduce, because we will have taken investments out and we limit those to up to 12 months. But if we do have investments of up to 12 months, they will be made at rates that appeared strong rates at the time. And then if the interest rates move very quickly in that 12-month period, which is what we've seen over the last 12 months, then they become less competitive in that sense. But we are fixed until the end of that period. We haven't undertaken any external borrowing in the 22-23 financial year. There was an element of that built into the Treasury strategy, should it be needed. But in terms of the delivery of the capital programme and the cash flow within the authority, we've not needed to borrow in that financial year. We may be looking to borrow in the coming financial year as our cash balances have started to reduce, which is what's been expected for a while now. So those cash balances are starting to reduce, which means from a cash flow point of view, we may need to replace some borrowing. If you look on page 3 of the report, page 17 of the pack, that shows the debt maturity that we have over the coming years, which takes us through to 2077, 78, I believe, when the final current debt that we have will be maturing. The expectation, of course, is that we will be repaying that debt, and we will be then taking out borrowing over that period to replace it and maintain the cash flow. What we do try and do is ensure that we don't have any significant spikes in repayment of any of that debt. Instead, we try and spread it out over a long period of time, which reduces the time risk in relation to being exposed to a spike in interest rates, for example. We haven't undertaken any debt rescheduling for a number of years, and again, we've discussed that previously at Audit Committee. This relates to a premium that is now charged in relation to any debt repayments that then need to be replaced. There's a forecast of the market set out, and the appendices then include all of the prudential indicators as required by SITFA under the Prudential Code. I'll stop there, but I'm happy to take any questions that members may have.
Floor is open to members. If there are any questions? I have one question, if I may, James, and that is on page 15 of the report, the second paragraph, which refers to the rates. Therefore, borrowing in the 10-year period early on in the financial year when rates were expected in those would be considered. Have we had to take any of that borrowing? Have we had to use any of that borrowing?
No. So in terms of any borrowing that we've undertaken, we haven't actually borrowed any funds at the local authority in terms of long term for a period of I think at least 10 years. In terms of short term borrowing, there is in very short term borrowing, there is always an opportunity from a cash flow point of view. So use the example, had we on the 20th of the month, we have a big salary payment schedule that goes out. So we need to be making sure that the cash is in the cash is in the bank to ensure that the payroll payments can be made. So what we would normally do is ensure that any short-term investments sufficient are maturing on that date so that those payments can be made. If that cash flow was too low at that point in time, you may undertake a small amount of borrowing from perhaps another local authority, which would then ensure that your cash balance is sufficient. Because if the alternative is to come out of a long-term investment, and that long-term investment might only be 3 months, but the loss in interest outweighs the cost of borrowing, then you wouldn't want to do that. So that's the only short-term borrowing that we'll be undertaking. But that's just part of general treasury management. It's not a PDP or B.
Thank you very much. Nigel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Page 19, investment outturns. The sea change in investment rates means local authorities faced with the challenge of proactive investment of surplus cash. What that's sort of implying is that, and you think about, there will be people, staff that you've got, that if they haven't had to do that sort of investing for 10 years, they haven't got the knowledge, the training and how to do it. Can I be reassured that we're going to be any good at it effectively? Although I do appreciate they've been very good when interest rates were low, so you would think that they would actually love the challenge of gaining more money.
Yeah. So, Chair, from an investment point of view, yeah, absolutely. The staff that we have at the moment are experienced and have borrowed and invested previously. In a sense, when interest rates are very low, there is very little opportunity to seek out those opportunities, and therefore it becomes just here's the balance. Let's have a look at what's available. Let's just make it secure, and then we put that in for a period of time. There's very little kind of individual kind of subjective thought process within that. As rates go up, there are more organisations that are available, more opportunities, more areas that we can invest in. Because we stick with the security liquidity yield element, the most, this has always been drummed into any treasury manager, return of your money is more important than return on your money. So make sure you get the money back is the number one thing. So what you then do within that parameter, what you're looking for is what are the best deals. Actually, it's not so much about the deals, it's about understanding, what's more important is understanding how long to tie the money up for. So there's some elements of there can be a margin related to, well, that 2-month deal looks good, but that 3-month deal looks very good. But the point is, if you need the money back in 2 months, then the 3-month deal is irrelevant in that sense. So it's more about understanding how to manage the money than it is to pick out the best deals, if that makes sense. It's important. That's how you perform the benchmark. But the most important bit is that you're making money, but you're keeping your investments.
Roger?
Thank you, Chairman. Picking up the paragraph that you alluded to earlier on, the final sentence of that paragraph, variable rate borrowing was also expected to be cheaper than long term. Question, who makes the decision about variable or fixed? Is it an operational decision or a policy decision? And following from that, the value of it, some of it can be many millions. Is that a cabinet decision, officers, or council? Because there are various limits to what can normally happen, isn't it? So that's wrong.
Yeah. So the Treasury strategy is approved by council, and that strategy then sets out what can be done in relation to officer discretions within that. So ultimately, it's my decision in terms of the discretion that falls within the Treasury strategy in terms of what that looks like. The way that we approach this, we would always undertake fixed rate borrowing over a long period of time, because that buys the certainty for the organisation. There are opportunities to use variable rate borrowing over short periods of time, but we don't tend to use that. What the Treasury strategy sets out is the kind of the wealth of the envelope that we work within in relation to what those investment opportunities are. That's approved by council, and those are as agreed with our Treasury advisor. But in terms of any decisions taken around borrowing, all of that would be taken in consultation and conjunction and discussion with our Treasury advisors. So, but it's very unlikely that we would undertake any variable rate borrowing.
Thank you. Jim, did you want to come in?
Yes, please, Ryan. Thanks. And thanks, Chair. And just a clarification about the borrowings going forward. If the council exhausted its reserves, cash reserves, could it take out borrowings to cover its day-to-day activities and costs? Is that permitted?
So, for my Chair, yeah, absolutely. So, the debt is secured against capital assets, but the what we're talking about is the cash that's available within the bank account to use. So what we have is several £100 million of borrowing, all of which will be repaid over a period of time through to 2077, 78. We will, as we repay that borrowing, we will need to replace that. In terms of the cash position, we then have revenue support grant, we have council tax, business rates, all the sorts of grants that come in, and then we have payments out in terms of the usual, debtors and creditors going in and out, but we also have salary costs and all the other costs you'd expect. So what we try to do is keep a cash balance of a high level. As that cash balance falls away, we will need to borrow to keep that cash balance up. You can't borrow to pay for revenue expenditure, but what you do is you borrow to keep your cash balances into the right level. If that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much following on from Jim was saying. This strategy, the debt strategy, does that cover both a debt which we have for capital project reasons, as well as what you've just been describing, what I described, like the working capital, if you have short-term borrowing, to meet payroll and that.
Yeah.
So it's both, is it?
So again, yeah, the PWE borrowing that we undertake is secured against assets and it's for capital purposes. What I'm saying is that the cash balances have to be maintained as part of that. So we should always have sufficient cash flow coming through. If you look at the overarching picture, what you're going to get into a situation of is, as existing PWB debt matures, in theory you would need to replace that because you need to keep your balances up. In reality, we haven't had to do that because our cash balances have been so high. So when we get to a point where we now cash balances are getting lower and we need to borrow, that will be borrowing because there will be capital programs that we need to undertake, and that's where that funding will come from. But the overarching cash position is what we manage overall.
Well, members, recommendations are at paragraph 3. Shall we endorse those recommendations?
Second.
All agreed? Thank you. We now move on to item 7 on the agenda, internal audit performance report, and I understand that Katie Williams, our head of audit, is going to introduce this report. Katie.
Thank you, Chair. This report summarises internal audit's work for the final quarter of 22-23, which contributes to the Chief Audit Executive's year-end opinion. The team has achieved its targets to deliver a minimum of 90% of the revised plan, and we achieved 94% this year, which is slightly below our previous delivery records, which is 97% in both 21-22 and 20-21. In that final quarter, we've issued 3 good, 6 reasonable, 5 limited and 2 unsatisfactory assurance opinions, and those 16 final reports contained 126 recommendations, 5 of which were fundamental. So the decisions for this report, members are asked to consider and endorse the performance against the internal audit plan for 22-23 and identify any actions they wish to take in response to the low assurance levels and fundamental recommendations that are brought to members' attention in the report, particularly where they've been repeated. So over the year, there have been changes to the planned audit activity, which have been adjusted to reflect changes in the resources of the team and the risks facing the council. And part of our plan this year has been delivered by an external audit contractor. Whilst the majority of the work was completed, there are 2 audits outstanding at year end that haven't been started, but we've received assurances that that planned work will commence imminently. So the 16 final reports that were issued in the period from January to March are listed Appendix A, Table 2, as the full year, and at paragraph 8.5 for the quarter. Moving on to page 26, it breaks down the where we are in the plan in terms of how much had been completed and the work still in progress. And the bar chart shows us the delivery of planned audit days against actual days. So paragraph 8.5 is to draw your attention to particularly the limited and unsatisfactory opinions and fundamental recommendations. Ask if there's any further follow-up action you wish to take. In that final period, 9 reports of the 16 provided good or reasonable assurance, which was 57% of opinions delivered, which is a slight decrease in the higher levels of assurance compared with last year's outturn at 59%. Countering that, there's a corresponding increase in limited and unsatisfactory assurances, which is currently at 43% for the period compared to the previous year outturn of 41%. In that time, finance and technology have received 4 limited and 1 unsatisfactory assurance level, and the Place Directorate have seen the highest number of unsatisfactory assurance opinions. Details of the control objectives in those audits that were found not to be in place that resulted in a limited or unsatisfactory assurance are listed at Appendix A, Table 3. At year end, we also had 12 draft reports awaiting management responses. So those haven't been included in this report. They'll be included in the September Audit Committee. Paragraph 8.10 onwards details the 5 fundamental recommendations, which includes the recommendation risk and the management response and the target implementation date. So if members want to consider if there's any action or follow-up they want to take on those. Paragraph 8.12 identifies areas where internal audit have added value with unplanned project or advisory work that's not included in the original plan days. Moving through the appendices, Table 2 on page 34 outlines all of the audit opinions for the year with their breakdown of the recommendations. And Table 3 on page 36 is where you'll see the breakdown of the controls in limited and unsatisfactory audits that haven't been achieved. And then finally, we usually have another table at the end of the report, but it's in the year-end opinion this time, isn't it? I'm going on autopilot anyway. Happy to take any questions in relation to the performance report.
Floor is open to members. Simon?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if this is really the appropriate place, but it's on page 27, and it's the audit report on SIL. I mean, one of the biggest problems I have as a parish councillor is trying to get access to SIL monies, and even trying to get the officers who run SIL to actually reply to my emails. So I find it difficult that it's actually come out as a good, whereas my experience, and I appreciate its performance rather than the process which you guys are auditing, but I do wonder if somewhere in there we're saying, yeah, you're okay, when fundamentally the coalface, it isn't. So
I can put that up.
Is that a fair comment? I don't want to.
No, completely. And the scope of that audit focused on the procedures and processes for administering the SIL funds rather than the process of getting access to them in the first place. So
no, I'm talking about exactly that. It's getting access to them once.
I think I have to say, Simon, I think your question is more appropriate for a scrutiny committee.
Oh, fine. No, fine.
Rather than audit.
Absolutely fine, Brian. I fully accept that. It's fine.
Chairman?
Yes.
I echo the thought about SIL. Maybe we can say as an audit committee, it isn't within our remit, but could the appropriate scrutiny committee pick this up?
I sort of see no reason why we can't.
We could
agree.
We could pass that over on that.
That
That comes from many areas.
Yeah, well, I would agree. Totally, I have my problems with SIL like every other member, but
Yeah.
and so it's entirely within our purview to recommend such a course of action. So shall we do that? We recommend to the chief exec or whatever responsible for overall control of committees and so on, this matter be dealt with by the appropriate scrutiny committee. Can you minute that in suitable terms, Michelle? Huh? Hello, Jim. Come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, Katie, please. In one of the previous documents, there's a mention of a shortage of staff in the audit team. Has that been resolved, or is it a risk for this current year audit plan? And the second one is regarding how do you track completion of the recommendations? Are they being completed on time and all appropriate actions being taken? Thanks.
Yeah, we still do have vacancies within the internal audit team. We are actually out to recruit at the moment. The closing date is the end of July. So hopefully we will have more resource within the team. Again, because of those vacancies, we are looking to go out to an external contractor again to supplement the internal audit plan work to fill those gaps because of those vacancies. In terms of tracking recommendation follow-up, there is a section within the report that details our process, but I can give you an overview of it. So it's table 7 on page 39. Any requires attention or best practice recommendations are left with management to address. Any significant or fundamental are reported to the director of that service area when they become due. In addition to that, any fundamental recommendations, internal audit would do follow-up testing to confirm that there is evidence that they've been implemented. And any audit report that is an unsatisfactory opinion will have a follow-up audit the following year, which will test that those recommendations have been implemented as agreed. So in part, there's some areas that are left with the directorate to manage, and we provide that information for them to follow up. But the significant fundamental issues, we look more into those and do follow-up audits where necessary.
Okay, Jim. Thank you. Rosemary.
Yeah, but, sorry, I'd like to just raise the audit of trees, and register concern about the risk concerns and satisfaction generally. I've noted what you said about trees and how we must, look at that again. But I'd just like to underline. I mean, it may be that this is something that has to go to scrutiny as well, Brian. I'm not sure. But just to say that I think it's a department that's absolutely essential. And my own experience of it is that there's some absolutely stunning work that goes on, but there's also a lot of things that feel very much like the report from audit shows there's a lack of leadership and a lack of cohesion really in the system there. And trees are not a nice to have anymore. They're an absolutely essential parts of climate change and everything else, doing mitigation for climate change. So I think it's something we should perhaps also refer to scrutiny or do what we can to look at ourselves on audit.
And there is a fundamental recommendation on tree safety as well as the unsatisfactory opinion. So it is within your gift if you'd like to ask that service area to come back and give an update on how they're progressing with addressing that unsatisfactory audit, because it is the second time they've been unsatisfactory.
I would like to suggest that we do that.
Yes, I think if it's the second time, they ought to know how seriously we take this particular issue. Yeah. Would it be possible to get hold of anybody for later in the agenda today, would it? No.
We could see if we could in the break if we can get hold
of
it.
Okay.
We can try.
We'll see if there's anybody that wants this. And I'll come back to it later in the agenda. If there isn't, it'll be on the next agenda. Okay, so agreed at the moment that it'll be on the next agenda unless we can deal with it today. Right, sorry, Roger, please.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. On the same section, 810, there's the backup arrangements, and I noticed the action date was June, and I recognise this report might have been written to get through the processes a little while ago, but with the backup arrangements and the importance it's put on cyber security and everything like this, I noticed that in the management response at the bottom of page 29, the words "we will refresh our backup processes," not "we have." And as the action was supposed to be by June, is there any update on that? Because, as I say, cyber is an important area.
Yeah, Barry.
I can provide a brief update on that. It'd be for the head of IT to come back and provide an updated position on that. But my understanding at this time is that a new backup solution has been procured and implemented. No audit testing has been undertaken since that audit report was completed and finalised. But my understanding is that the new backup solution is in place and operative now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, we are invited to note the report with appropriate comment. I think we've done that. Identify any actions we wish to take, and I think we've done that. So, shall we agree to endorse the recommendations? Okay. Thank you. We will now move on to, if I can tell you that I'm proposing to take a break as near as possible to 11:15. And at that stage, Katie will try to see if there's anybody available at front of the tree, people to talk to us if necessary, remotely. Quite happy to have them remotely if they're not in Shirehall. So Katie will see what can be done on that when we take our break. Right. We now move on to Barry, who is going to introduce item 8, the annual assurance report from the Audit Committee.
Thank you, Chair. So this annual report provides members with the details of work undertaken by the internal audit team for the period ending 31st of March 2023. It informs on the delivery against the approved internal audit plan and includes the Chief Audit Executive's opinion on the Council's internal controls as required by the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards.
Well, I thought we were on paper 8.
Are you introducing paper 9?
Sorry, I was introducing paper 9.
So
thank you, Jim.
paper 8 will be, I'll introduce that.
Am I continuing at this point?
All right, I've got a note that we agreed that you told me that Barry was going to introduce this, even though James Walton's name is against
This is
it.
the annual assurance report to council. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So I'm
which of you are going through?
Yeah.
Barry's introducing item 9.
Yeah.
I'll introduce item 9. Yeah.
Oh, you gave me false information in our
I
pre-meeting.
apologise if I did that. I didn't intend to.
Right, okay, so James, it is James. Sorry, Barry.
Yeah, so apologies all, and apologies, Chair, if I did mislead, I do.
We're back on track now.
Okay, so
Item 8.
This is item 8, and this is the annual assurance report to council. So annually, a report is made by the audit committee to full council to demonstrate the committee's findings and any conclusions and recommendations that they wish to make. There is attached as the appendix the annual assurance report for the 22-23 financial year, which the chair has reviewed and considered and may wish to comment on in a moment and signed. That then will go forward to council for consideration and provides details of all of the work that has been undertaken by the audit committee over the last year. So I'm happy to take any questions or whether there's anything you want to pick up specifically, Chair, in terms of that appendix.
Members all okay with that? Well, shall we note the report? Agreed? Thank you very much. Now I think we do come to Barry. For item 9, third line assurance, internal audit annual report. Barry, please.
Change your mics. Thank you, Chair. So I'll continue from where I left off. The internal audit plan for 22-23 was considered and approved by the audit committee at its meeting on the 22nd of February 2022. The plan provided a total of 1,429 days. There were revisions throughout the year that have been reported to the audit committee to reflect the change in risks and resources, and the plan was revised to 1,569 days in total. In arriving at my opinion, I've taken the following into account. The results of all internal audit work undertaken to the 31st of March 23, The results of the corporate governance and risk management audits, results of fundamental audit reviews, self-assessments and their direction of travel, and those can be found at Appendix A, Table 3. Implementation of recommendations that are fundamental in nature, assurance levels provided and their direction of travel, and those recommendation ratings compared against the risk appetite of the council. Fundamental recommendations that have not been accepted by management and the consequent risks associated with those, and the effects of any material changes on the organisation's objectives or activities. So further consideration of the assurance levels of the completed audit shows that the plan continued to flex along with the business environment over the year. These were reported and approved in the September 2022, November 22 and February 23 audit committees. And the revised planned work alongside the activity has helped provide appropriate assurance to council. Some of the other areas contributing to the opinion also appear in Appendix A, Table 2. There are concerns that some of the unsatisfactory assurances are repeat offenders, as we picked up in the report from Katie. And there has been a focus on addressing these by escalating to executive directors for appropriate action. Cybersecurity continues to be key, and the council's reliance on key digital systems is significant. Audit reviews in these areas have identified increased areas of risk that require an investment in the control environment. During 22-23, there's been an increase in the number of limited and unsatisfactory assurance levels in those areas. However, there has been a new digital strategy which is aligned to the Shropshire plan, and that was published in January 2023. Given the overall proportion of assurance levels of key systems and the delay in delivering improved controls, some of which are fundamental and significant, the level of assurance which the Chief Audit Executive can provide to the council is obviously impacted on. Payroll was not audited during 22-23 as management provided assurance that the required improvements had not been made at that point. The assurance level remains unsatisfactory in this area. 26 good and reasonable assurances were made in the year, accounting for 59% of the overall opinions delivered. This represents a 5% decrease in the higher levels of assurance compared to the previous year, which is offset by a 5% increase in limited and unsatisfactory opinions. 5 unsatisfactory opinions and 13 limited assurance opinions were issued. So on this basis, and based on the management responses received, I can offer limited assurance for the 22-23 financial year on the council's framework of governance, risk management and internal control. Also, I'd like to point out that the internal audit team has gone through some significant change over the year with changes in senior management. Within the report, you'll also see the feedback that we've received from our customers throughout the year, which has remained positive, and that's a testament to the professionalism of the internal audit team led by Katie. So I will leave it there and take any questions.
Yeah, I'd like to take members to page 61. Page 61. The trend in internal audit opinions. What I find interesting is that to note that in 2019-20 there was a sudden, quite significant increase in the unsatisfactory opinions, which went on for the next 2 years, and in 22-23 it has dropped back again. This seems to indicate to me very strongly how much COVID affected those 3 years, 19-20, 2021, 21-22, and we're now getting back, hopefully, to the reduction in unsatisfactory audits. that we had prior to COVID. So I'm happy to blame COVID for the increase over these 3 years and to welcome our COVID-free situation now as appearing to support the view that the number of unsatisfactory recommendations is dropping again. Anybody else want to come in? Simon?
I mean, it's a fairly general question. It sort of goes back to the performance as well. The number of days, which I think 1,569, that was 22-23. I mean, it does tie into the audit opinion. Was that up on or down on the previous year? And going forward, have we budgeted the same number of days or fewer days? It's just that if you have a sort of declining trend, you know, less is being audited, basically, I guess. Yeah, thanks.
I can pick that one up. Thank you. So in 21-22, we planned for 1,708 days and delivered 1,655. In 22-23, there were 1,569 planned days versus 1,470 delivered. So in the 23-24 plan that came to you in February, it was planned for 1,794 days. So there will be some changes to that since then that will come to you September committee, because we've had some changes in staff and obviously with Kerry's role as head of audit going and the change of Barry moving, the head of policy and governance will result in some resource changes for the team.
That's encouraging because we're looking for a pick-up on the previous, on the year we've just given our opinion on. Thank you. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, member. If you look at page 64, item 820, you will see that this item is included in the report in heavy type, indicating the importance of this particular paragraph, and I can certainly support that. It is important that we as a committee note that our audit staff can only offer limited assurance, and that the fact that this is not the highest level of assurance is one that is sad, but we as a committee should strongly endorse that. So when we come now to note the decisions we are asked to make, which are on page 58, paragraph 3, the last one is that we endorse the Chief Audit Executive's limited assurance, and I'm sure that members will wish to emphasise that we strongly support that conclusion. So can we agree the decisions we're asked to make on paragraph 3 of page 58? All in favour? Thank you. We now move to item 10, annual review of internal audit, quality assurance and improvement programme. QAIP. QAIP. James? QAIP.
Do my best.
Don't minute that.
Sorry, the report.
Page item 10, page 81 for members.
Okay, so this report covers the quality assurance and improvement programme, or the QAIP, as it is referred to, which follows the public sector internal audit standards, which is the science, just to use as many difficult acronyms as we possibly can. The accounting audit regulations require that we have an effective independent audit service. And so as part of that, we undertake this annual review in terms of the quality of the internal audit team. And we also then have an external assessment which is provided every 5 years. So the last assessment was in 2022, and that demonstrated that compliance with the requirements was actually in place. So as part of the review, we undertake a self-assessment, but what we try to do is to be as open and transparent in relation to all of the areas that we consider. So all of those are shown within the appendix. And where we have areas that we are unable to show complete compliance, we identify that there is partial compliance against a couple of standards, and we set those out and our reasoning for why we believe those standards are only partially complied with. So the explanations are there, the information is there. In terms of the particular areas that have been picked up, these are the same or similar areas to those that have been picked up previously, and relate to the way in which the local authority is organised in relation to the way in which the audit committee is set up. So, for example, there is an area which talks about the chief audit executive and can they be completely organisationally independent. They give examples of how that would be demonstrated, and because of the arrangements that we have, we're therefore unable to meet that particular standard or those examples that have been given, but we then say this is the way in which we are arranged, and this is the way in which we believe that we can still ensure, in that example, independence for the chief audit executive. That said, we are always open to challenge and consideration. So if you have any questions, not only about those areas where we believe to be partially compliant, but those areas where we believe we are fully compliant, then we're happy to take those questions and to discuss those as necessary.
Comment? I have one comment to make. Last year, we were one of the partially compliant matters in relation to the audit committee was the fact that we didn't have an independent member, when the recommendation for audit committee generally was that they should have one. I'm pleased that we have now rectified that partial compliance to full compliance by appointing Jim Arnold as the independent member. So you've helped us to comply, Jim. We've reduced the partial compliance to the point that James has just made. Shall we endorse the annual review of internal audit quality assurance? All agreed. Thank you. We now come to Grant Patterson, our engagement lead from our external auditors, who will introduce the external audit plan for the pension committee.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to give a bit of background to why the plan's coming to yourselves. Within the council's governance arrangements, the audit committee approves or is owed charge of governance when it comes to the council's full financial statements of accounts. The pension fund.
Sorry, Chairman, is it the audit progress report first? Item 11.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Yes, sorry.
Yes, it is. Sorry, let me stop you, Brad. Are there any members understand that we are now on item 11? Everybody happy with that?
Right, sorry.
We haven't got item 11 in our pack.
No, it's a verbal update, Chair. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, it's not even listed as a. Yeah,
it does say
It's on
my agenda.
Oh, my agenda, yes,
we'll
yeah.
give a verbal
We
update.
follow along the pack and it's not there.
Right. Yes, I'm sorry. I led you astray because I went to the next
But I was going to cover it all off, Chair. So in one, but I'll backtrack slightly then to item 11, a verbal update on where we are in terms of the 2021 audits, 21-22 audits, and then in a way that then leads into the 22-23 planning process. So in terms of the accounts for 2021, I can confirm that we have now issued an unqualified opinion on the council's accounts for 2021, including the pension fund accounts, and also a consistency opinion that says that the pension fund annual report figures in there are consistent with the accounts within the council statement of accounts. So that was actually completed yesterday. We received the updated accounts on Monday. So we've worked through the final accounts and from Monday, and we've issued our opinions. So 2021 statement of accounts audit opinions have been issued. The certificate is still open. We've still got to do some final procedures on whole of government accounts. We have one objection. I can't remember, we had two objections on the financial statements. We've made a decision on one, and we have one which we're working through. And then we also just need to finalise our value for money work now that we've completed the audit of the financial statements. So 2021, that's progressed, and I think that's in line with comments I made at the last audit committee that we were seeking to sign that off before this audit committee. And I know it was very close one day, but we have managed to achieve that. In terms of 21-22, we've now received, I think, in terms of that audit is substantially complete. The area we were finalising was in relation to the potential changes in the council's net pension liability. We've had updated reports from the actuary, which have gone through we've looked at. We have some questions for the actuary that we need to resolve. Primarily, I think at a high level, very high level, the pension fund funding has overall improved, but when we look at the IAS 19 reports, the actual liability for the council has not improved. So I think at a fundamental level, we just need to understand what the differences are between why the funding position of the fund might improve, but not yourselves as an employer, and that's consistent across other employers. So it's not just yourself. So we think it's something to do with the risk profile that the actuary is now using, but it's the details not in the report. So I will be liaising with Justin Bridges as a head of pensions to see how we might get those questions to the actuary, whether that's directly or through Justin. But once we've had those responses back, and hopefully they'll be sensible, we will be looking to conclude a 21-22 audit. I've got a discussion with Mary as the audit manager later whether we can complete that by the end of this month or not. We will be looking out about that, but if not, it should be shortly after the end of July when we finalise the 21-22 audits. And that then I suppose leads us into in those 21-22, the pension fund audit for 21-22 is complete. So once the council audit is finalised, then we'll be able to issue the pension fund opinion alongside that. That then moves us on to, I suppose, item 12, which is the planning for 22-23. And we've already taken the plan in front of you today. I wasn't going to go through it in detail, which is the audit plan for the pension fund. We have taken that through pensions committee, and I know, Chair, you sit on pensions committee, so you would have seen this. In terms of that, and we take it through pensions committee, as whilst this committee in the governance very technically is those charged with governance, i.e. you approve the council's accounts and the pension fund's accounts are within those accounts. We do determine to communicate with the pensions committee because they do oversee the annual report production, and effectively the accounts form part of the annual report. So as they're overseeing that, we tend to, for the pension fund, we communicate with them, but we then report to you about the work we're undertaking and if there are any issues, so that when you come to approve the statement of accounts, you have the assurances that you would require to approve the pension fund element of the council statement of accounts. So in terms of the plan in front of you today, it is a pension fund account, pension fund plan. I wasn't going to go through it in detail in terms of significant risks in relation to that. Primarily around valuation of assets. So again, the level 3 investments will be our focus of our main audit on the pension fund. The changes this year, probably to note, are in that our approach to materiality is we've effectively setting a specific materiality on the what we call a pension fund account, which is the income and expenditure account, as a sort of change nationally as a firm to. We believe stakeholders will be interested mainly in benefits and contributions. So we're setting effectively a specific lower materiality on the fund account. So we'll do the impact of that. We'll be doing a little bit more testing around the elements within this, both the income and expenditure side of the pension fund around that. But overall, there isn't really a change to our overall approach to the pension fund audit for this year. No new significant risks identified in relation to that. And I think the only issue we identified last year was a timing difference between the draft accounts and then when some final returns come in. So that's the overall plan for the pension fund. In terms of where we are on planning for the council's 22-23 audit, I mean, I will give some detail now, but Mary can come in with more details. We're finalising our plan on that. We would have hoped to have brought a plan to this committee. But under auditing standards, I need to have completed a sufficient amount of work to be able to do that. One of the key elements we need to finalise is, and it does link in to a certain extent from papers you've seen earlier, there is a new ISA, or not an updated ISA for us, an auditing standard called 315. That involves us, that does require us to get and document in much more detail our understanding of the IT systems and IT arrangements. We haven't been able to finalise that work yet. We have been liaising with Ben Joe, who's not on the call, and that is beginning to move. But I suppose in a way that's consistent. I mean, if you from the internal audit reports, there's a lot of some challenges going on in the IT area at the moment. So we are finalising that work, and it is key because depending on the outcomes of that, that will sort of generate how we undertake our or levels of testing we undertake. In terms of, I suppose, just picking up on that, in terms of overall control environment, our audit approach is primarily substantive. So those issues you've heard earlier probably won't have a direct impact upon the level of work we do, because we do a primary substantive testing of the transactions within the accounts. So there are, however, irrespective of the plan being that we have received the draft accounts from the council. We have started to pick some interim samples, so we are sort of starting the audit in order to make progress over the summer, and that information is beginning to flow through to us in relation to that. So I am looking to probably circulate the plan once we've agreed that between meetings, and then it may be formally presented in September. I think come September, we would have finished substantively all our audit work. There might be procedures that go beyond that into October. So I think we are looking at potentially in September being an interim report to you with final reporting in I think looking at committee cycle in November. However, in September, I think there will be a significant amount of work for the audit committee to undertake, because I think we will be bringing final work on the pension fund, and also I think on that time we will be doing some joint audit reporting in terms of value for money. So there will be a significant number of papers from us on the next audit committee. I don't know if Mary wants to add anything to 22-23 that I've just covered there or not, just to give you a detailed or more detailed update. So.
Thanks, Grant. Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to talk about 22-23 and the work that we've done so far and the link with IT. The work around IT and understanding the IT environment is being completed by our central IT experts. So that does underpin the work we do around significant risks, and that's primarily in relation to property, plant and equipment, but more importantly, the journals work. So in order to select journal samples, for example, we do need to understand that risk assessment of the IT environment. So as soon as that work is complete, it will allow us to progress in that area, in particular in relation to journals. We have spent time with the finance team. We had 2 weeks where we've actually selected the majority of the substantive samples, which do take a significant amount of time for the finance team. So the samples are with them. There are some areas where we haven't received information, which we're working through with finance at the moment, but that hopefully that should give finance, council's finance team, time to go through those samples, which are actually quite substantial in some areas. I didn't have anything else I wanted to add, but happy to take any questions on that process.
Thank you very much, Mary and Grant. There are no questions. Sorry, Simon.
Yes, yeah, Grant. It seems that one of the delays for the 20/21 has been you had a couple of presumably public questions, and one of them you've dealt with, and one is now is still outstanding, and that in itself is preventing you actually, even though you've issued the opinion, it's preventing you from closing it and signing off. Two questions. One is, when will it actually be? When do you think it will actually be signed off, and we can put 2021 to bed? And the second question is, have you got questions, queries on the 21/22 accounts as well, or has that just not happened this time round?
No, I mean, yeah, in response to that, we had two formal objections to 2021. There's, and say one we've worked through and the decision has been made. The second one, the reason why it's taken slightly longer is our approach generally is because if we have to take additional work, there's additional cost to the public around us doing work. The council is looking to resolve the matter with the objector. It has provided more information, but the objector is not fully satisfied. Therefore, we're having to undertake some work. I'm looking to bring a specialist in to help us in that area, and I would hope, we haven't got a set timetable yet, that should be ready for the next audit committee. And I need to liaise with James around just finalising, also looking at our VFM work. So I would hope that come the next audit committee is when we'd formally certify the audit close. I will just stress we've issued an unqualified opinion in relation to the accounts, that they do give a true and fair representation of the council transactions in 2021. So this is the audit certificate and concluding the audit. There are no such objections on 21/22. And for 22/23, we've not received any either. So at the moment, there aren't any sort of formal other questions coming through.
Thank you. I'll cut you off because that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Should we know what this objection is, or do we know? I mean, is it something for us, or?
That's a good question. I mean, it's actually a grey area in that sense. They are, I suppose, in our communications directly between the auditor and the objector. The council is copied into the final decision, so we have shared a copy with James as in his role. I think it is possible for you to, and I think in the past we may well have done this. I can't remember, Brian. It's a long number of years ago now as we had one. If you take them in private session, then I think it is possible for you to consider the matters in the objection. I mean, basically, I mean, I can take the high level areas. One is around highways and one is around planning. And some of it does interestingly just pick up on some of the information, the questions that you raised around SIL as well. So I'm happy to have a discussion with James and maybe the chair about how you wish to receive maybe the high level findings from those in relation to that. I mean, what I can say on the one that we have made a decision on, we are not proposing to issue a public interest report, and we're not proposing to go to court to seek a declaration as an unlawful item of account. I think we have noted there are some areas potentially for improvement as part of that. So, but I'm happy to discuss that with the chair and with James about how best to communicate those findings, because they're not secretive in that sense, and they do impact upon, I think, your role as, you know, an audit committee that's looking at the processes and arrangements within the council. But I'm happy to.
Thank you, Grant. Over to you.
Well, we'll have that put on the agenda for the next meeting. We'll agree that will be on the agenda in the excluded items for the next meeting. Okay. Rosemary.
Thank you. Yeah, just following on from what Simon and Grant have just said, this discussion has been ongoing between the audit committee and Grant for some time. Probably a year ago, we were talking about the delay from these two objections. It does suggest to me that we don't have the right process in place for dealing with this kind of objection. It's an objection to the auditor from a member of the public, presumably, about processes in planning and highways in the council. It just seems to me that perhaps you know, we don't have the right system of grievance or whatever it is, you know, what
Right,
process.
well, let us see what the officers say. James, would you like to say a word on this before Grant?
Just a very quick comment. It's just really to make the point that, yeah, the accounts are produced, and in a sense, every piece of work that the council undertakes is somehow represented within the financial statements, and therefore, when it goes out to the public and they wish to raise something, they can use that as an opportunity to raise it, because somewhere in there will be an argument that can be made, therefore, that the accounts are somehow misstated because of this particular piece of work over there. So it's very wide ranging. What you then have is often a very complicated point that's being made around something that's tied into the accounts. So then from the external auditor's point of view, to be fair to them, they then have to be looking at procedures and processes that they would not normally be looking at. This is an area that, you know, very specific area. What then happens is that the service area, who have already in a number of cases responded or tried to respond to the particular issue that's been raised, now have a formal objection because the individual is unsatisfied. Some of that is completely justified. Some of that will be, it's another opportunity to raise it in another way and get the kind of leverage in to have that conversation. So, yeah, I accept the point that there are always going to be improvements that can be made around the processes. The difficulty is that you can't possibly have a process in place for all of the objections that are going to come in from all the different areas, and where something is really complex, really specific, might be going back a number of years, etc., that just takes time to work through. And because of the value added by, there's a cost associated with it as well, which is unfortunate because the council's picked this up, but the value added from the external auditors looking at it is at least you get an independent review of that particular process. And if there are questions, concerns, issues raised as part of that, it does then allow that process to be improved. The reality is that you'll never kind of improve that process in a way that deals with the next objection coming in, because it can come from any direction.
I think you'll understand this a great deal better after we've had the report at the September meeting, and you may have a valid question then with the full understanding of the nature of the issue. Roger.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I understand what has just been said, but for 2 years to settle 2 objections, I think is not satisfactory. There needs to be something done. As an audit committee, we need to ask, why has it taken 2 years? And the process, with all the communications that are at present available to anybody and everybody, it is not acceptable to have 2 years to settle just 2 objections. No matter how complex or anything like this, if we get objections in the future and the way things are happening with other areas, we may get more and more, and we're lucky that in the following year there wasn't any. There needs to be some sort of timescales put in, which is acceptable to the audit committee for objections to be sorted.
I think your comments will have even more validity when you have heard the basis of these objections at the September meeting, and I look forward to you making the comments then with full knowledge of the background.
I mean, Chair, I will just come. I mean, I think the council makes a valid point. We are looking to. I mean, I think we have to make sure the objections are right. We have roundabout. We should. I think the indicative from the NAO is it looks for us to, wherever possible, to get them complete within about a year. I think so we do. I will come back as part of the report to explain. But that, I have to say, it's not the objections primarily that have delayed 2021. It's been there have been auditing issues behind the accounts themselves. So I wouldn't want to put. I'm maybe shooting myself in the foot and maybe doing this. It's not just the objections that have led to those delays in 2021. So I wouldn't want to put everything on the objections or the objectors that they're exercising their rights. But I mean, in terms of that, there have, as we had these documented conversations. So it's a factor, but it's not. It's a factor that stops me certifying the audit closed, not the not issuing the opinion. So but we'll come back in September with a bit more detail behind those, what we're looking into, and areas of potential improvement for the council. So.
We shall all wait a God, Grant. Now, I think we have to consider that Grant has introduced 2 reports together, which was very sensible. The first report was the verbal report, the external audit progress report. So shall we resolve to note that report with thanks? Agreed. The next one was the pension fund audit plan. And I think that one thing that we as an audit committee ought to note with satisfaction is that there were no significant risks identified in the pension fund accounts for the year ending 31st of March 2023. So shall we note the external audit plan for the pension fund as presented by our external auditors?
Yeah, Chair, sorry, I hate to sort of correct in terms of, I said no new significant risks. I mean, I think what I'm trying to say is in terms of the plan is there are significant risks from an audit perspective, but they are the ones that you would have seen in the past in relation to the valuation level for investments, which are complex, and in relation to the presumed audit significant risk around management override control, which I cannot rebut. So I think what I was trying to stress was we haven't identified any new issues. These are really significant risks that are inherent in all pension funds. So sorry for the clarification, but there are sort of audit significant risks, but they really just direct our audit work and how much work we have to do. That is not implying necessarily there was an issue in the pension fund accounts. In previous reporting, we've never had to report, in those issues along in that manner. So.
Thank you, Grant, for that brief clarification. Very helpful. So shall we accept the pension fund audit plan? Note and accept the pension fund audit plan as presented. Shall we agree? Thank you. Well, we've come to a point very close to the 11:15 where I said we would have a break. And it's a timely point to have a break because we're now going to contact Andy Wilde for item 13 and Sam Williams from item 14 and possibly somebody from the tree. So I think we'll break now till 11:20. 11:12. We'll break till 11:20 and resume at 11:20. All agreed?
Yeah.
Thank you. Are you indicating we are live? Thank you very much. Well, we are now live again to the public. So we can, first of all, with item 13, Dog Wardens Management Update. Andy Wild is with us. Thank you, Andy. Would you like to present this report and give us any latest news and answer questions? Andy Wild.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. So just to set some context initially, which is probably helpful. So I'm the interim assistant director for highways and transport. A change of setup probably 18 months ago resulted in the street scene and grounds maintenance service coming into the highways portfolio, and with it sits the dog warden service. So at that point, the outstanding audit report was with the recommendations was there. Following on from that, a full kind of review has been undertaken of the dog warden service, and a re-procurement exercise has been completed, which now gives us better control and ability to deal with stray dogs. We've also undertaken a work on a formal contract arrangement and a public protection order, which will see us have a now far better ability to enforce. That the actual audit was undertaken highlighted a range of concerns. As you can see, we've gone through a review of all of those, and the vast majority of those outstanding concerns have either been completed or we're in a far stronger position with the work that's been undertaken. The work that's been undertaken has also allowed us to strengthen the administrative arrangements around stray dogs, and we now have a stray dog register and better control over how we capture and record the incidents of stray dogs being reported to the council. So we've now, in terms of risk profile, the amount of money that is taken up with this is fairly small in terms of the context for the wider service. However, we've now moved to a better position, and we will need to do a full review again of the contracting arrangements. But at this moment, we've actually closed out the vast majority of the points highlighted. I'm more than happy to take any questions in relation to this, Chair, if any members have got questions that they'd like to ask.
Right. Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. It was really useful to get that report to understand what was going on. I appreciate that. Actually, the very first comments you had, and I know there's been a lot of flux regarding the reporting lines. Is street scene still going into yourself? And if so, who's in charge of it?
Okay, so street scene is part of the highways and maintenance highways service. We are going through a management review at this moment, Councillor Harris. So the service is going to go through a transformation programme very similar to the ones that the highway maintenance service has been through. And that will result in some management changes, which I'll be happy to report back to councillors at some point, because it's a delicate stage at this moment. So yeah, the highways street scene service exists. But I think the other point I would just like to make is that I think from my perspective, the one thing that I'm very keen to look at is that we've got the correct protocols and procedures in place, but we also look at a wider campaign of communication around, antisocial behaviour, management of dogs, dog fouling, and we then have, obviously the powers and the ability to follow that through. But I think that's something that we need to look at in terms of how we raise public awareness and how we advertise the fact more widely that we've got strong procedures in place and try and address some of those issues that we're currently seeing.
I think that. So, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. Dog review. On page 115, at the bottom, sentence, in response to the management review, customary inquiries and accusations that the council was not taking sufficient enforcement action against dog fouling. What is the council doing about dog fouling? I'm getting it from all over the area that it's there and nothing is happening. I understand from other areas that we just have one dog warden to cover the whole of Shropshire. Now, there may be other officers who have powers to take care of dog fouling, which is one of the basic problems that many councillors face at present. So how is that being tackled? And I couldn't see any relation to that anywhere in the report. And as that sentence is there in it, I feel that I can ask it as part of this audit committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, so in relation to that specific point, I mean, Councillor Evans raises a fair question, and I think the interesting part for me is that this spans, as you've alluded to, a number of different service areas. So even though it's sort of squarely in sort of the dog warden service sits within street scene, it does span across enforcement and public protection and other services. So from my perspective, the management review that we're about to undertake on the street scene service will need to be cognizant of this area, because you're absolutely right. We have one dog warden for Shropshire at this moment in time, and their focus is primarily on stray dogs and the recovery and the management of stray dogs. We've got to look at how we can deal with the enforcement side of it, and how we can issue fixed penalty notices, and having the correct protocol in place was important first step. And then it's wider conversations with other colleagues about how we can get more ability and have more boots on the ground and actually have a presence, because I think that talks to the comms piece that I was referencing there previously. So for me, there's a number of things that we can do and start to look at and improve our performance in that area.
Yes, I think, Roger, that you might find it useful to make a scrutiny request on this. As far as audit's concerned, we have looked at the service, and we have made our officers have made their comments and come back to us with an assessment of the service. So basically, as audit, we've gone as far as we can.
If I can I maybe, stretching that elastic even more, suggest that we note that we would like this to be put on some future programme, because if one looks at the Shropshire plan for healthy living, etc., and all the rest of it, then this is quite important, and it's raised by many mothers with children going to schools in various parts of the county, and the health of people generally. So can it be looked at on future programme of some scrutiny committee as part of their looking at the Shropshire plan?
Yes, if you wish. I see no reason, Michelle, why this we cannot resolve to refer this to the appropriate scrutiny committee. You know that, please, please. All right, well, if there are no other questions for Andy, thank you very much for coming back to us on this. And we will note both your written and your verbal reports. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
You bring up that. Okay. Do we go to Andy Wigley now?
Yeah.
Andy Wigley, who has come in at short notice in that to respond to the request for more detail on the matter of the tree searches. So, yes, would you like to raise the question, Rosemary? I think that's the easiest way of dealing with it.
Yeah, thank you. Andy, thank you for coming at short notice as well. We're concerned about the audit report on trees. As a member of my own division, I can report excellent work from tree officers, but also very worrying situations where things have not been dealt with, and that chimes my own experience as a divisional member, it chimes with the comments about a need to reorganise in trees, in the tree officers department. My concern about trees generally is that, you know, they are beautiful public amenities in Shropshire, all over Shropshire, but they are also absolutely vital, a vital resource as well for our fight against climate change. Absolutely essential. And I think that a cohesive policy about that recognises that, if you like, upgrade to the need to police or manage our trees to the very best of our abilities is there really as an urgent need. So I'm just wondering what we're going to do to bring some more order to that.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me, councillors, to the meeting, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to the report. Obviously, the focus of the audit report was tree safety issues. It might assist if I gave just a sort of overview of the structure of the tree team. I'm the sort of service manager for that area, so it's one of the number of teams that I manage. The team itself is managed by a team leader who's a county arboriculturalist. That's Martin Sutton. He has 2 full-time equivalent technicians that sort of act as the sort of coordinators for the team, dealing with and handling inquiries and so forth that come into the team. There are 4 full-time arboricultural officers, and they deal primarily with tree safety matters. So there are 2 officers who are involved in safety services on the county's highway network, and then 2 officers who are dealing with other aspects of our estate, so dealing with, for example, school safety inspections, and looking at a number of our other estate assets and the safety of those. And then there are 2.5 full-time equivalents tree and woodland amenity protection officers. So they deal primarily with the planning functions of the authority and providing advice in relation to sort of the tree issues in that respect. And then we also have a full-time trees outside woodlands officer that they're dealing with. That's a DEFRA funded post. I think it's been extended up to 2025 now, and they're looking at opportunities for planting trees outside of woodlands, and that's primarily focused on sort of orchard type planting on farmland. And we are about to go out to recruit to another externally funded post, and that's a Woodland Accelerator Fund post, looking at again opportunities for woodland planting outside of across the county, primarily in relation to sort of mitigating climate changes, as you mentioned. As I say, the audit reports focus primarily on tree safety issues. We have a action plan at the end of that, one of which is an updated one item on which is an updated tree safety policy, and we're working our way through that. And one of the issues around that is looking at capacity for highways officers to undertake an element of the inspections regime for that. So obviously we're hoping to bring that to Cabinet hopefully later this year, once we finalise and array the details in that. And there are a number of other pieces of work there, looking, for example, at the software systems the teams use, whether it's fit for purpose, and it gives us an audit trail across the authority in terms of following through actioning of the team's recommendations. So I hope that's given you an overview of the team and where they're at. As I said, the audit reports focus primarily on tree safety, so it's an element of the team's work, but it doesn't sort of relate to all of its areas. I don't know if that answers your question, Councillor Dartnell, but it sort of gives it hopefully a flavour of what the team are involved in.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think that it explains a much wider team than I think that many of us might have thought was available. Yeah, I think okay, thank you.
Yes. Just one query, not related directly to tree safety. You talk about externally funded posts. So these are not a cost on Shropshire Council, presumably.
No,
Where does
no,
external funding come from?
It's funding through DEFRA. So the one officer we have in post currently is fully funded through DEFRA, through a project area that they're looking at, and that's around opportunities and again linked to climate change mitigation for woodland planting outside of woodlands, specifically on farmland. So that involves engaging with farmers and landowners and looking for opportunities on their land. The other post I refer to is also fully funded through DEFRA, and that's again looking at opportunities for woodland creation, across the county. Again, that will involve a lot of liaison with landowners and farmers, a lot of sort of opportunities mapping in sort of in GIS, and mapping technology to look at what sites are suitable and so forth. But they are externally funded through DEFRA.
Thank you. Right, shall we note with thanks Andy's verbal report, and also note the delightful background to your presentation, and the trees are everywhere. Great. Okay, we know.
Absolutely. I'm not actually sat in a quarry, obviously.
No. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Right. We now move to item 14, annual whistleblowing report. And we have, pleased to say, we have Sam Williams with us to present the report. Sam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides the annual update to Audit Committee on the number of whistleblowing cases raised over the last financial year. The whistleblowing speaking up about wrongdoing process forms a key element of the Council's corporate governance arrangements. Section 7 of the report provides further background to the policy and why it's so important. The policy is available to staff via the intranet pages and is also available to them along with members, contractors, partners and members of the public via the website, which allows it to be fully accessible to all. So looking at the last financial year, in 22-23, there were 29 cases. Excuse me. So 29 cases, which is an increase of 14%, which equates to 4 cases more than the previous year. The number of incidents reported in the last 5 years, for comparison, are shown in the table at 8.2.4. The number of cases reported can fluctuate year on year, as you'll see in that table. However, the figures for the last financial year are similar to the preceding year. The reports in the last year have been predominantly via email and phone, which compared to the previous year, which all reports were via email. The most reported theme was financial incidents, which includes theft, tenancy and tax fraud. 6 cases were referred to an external party. When we compare to previous years, so in 21-22, there were 25 cases reported, the majority of which were also related to financial incidents. So there is a similar theme there. The year prior to that, there were 35 cases reported, and the majority of those were related to grant funding, grant fraud. So given the consistent reports of whistleblowing each year that we do have, this demonstrates that the process provides an effective route to enable employees, members, contractors and others to raise concerns that they may have around fraud, corruption, child protection or adult protection issues, harassment and bullying allegations. As we do each year, following this report, we raise awareness of the policy and the process via the intranet, and we will also do periodic communications throughout the year as well. In addition, this year we are reviewing the employee bullying and harassment policy, specifically looking at third-party harassment, and that is through an overview and scrutiny task and finish group. Which obviously has very close links to this policy as well. So we will be looking at how the two work together over the next few months as well. So happy to take any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Sam. A question really about the no case to answer number 15. It's quite a high number. Does that, were those because they were absolutely, there was nothing at all found, or were they, is there any element of malicious reporting, or it seems like a high number?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I think it's a number of those things. Obviously, whistleblowing is predominantly used on an anonymous basis, so people will ring in, not leave any details, and therefore some details can be quite brief. Therefore, once we've actually looked into it, there may not be anything there. You're absolutely right. There could well be allegations which are malicious as well. So it doesn't concern me in terms of the numbers, because I think that is the usual kind of pattern that we do see. Right, administration. Yes. Yeah.
Right. So shall we note Sam's report with thanks? Agree? Right. So stay with us, Sam, because you're coming on very shortly. We now move to item 15 to note the date and time of the next meeting. And then we come to item 16 to resolve the exclusion of press and public. Shall we agree to such exclusion? Thank you. Are we